control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we're covering an episode from a show called Circle of Fear. Now this is an unusual one because it's really a show we've already covered. However, it was rebranded, renamed and so on. So I thought I'd give it another chance. The series it really was one called Ghost Story, which I covered on Anthologic episode 155 just under a year ago, where I talked about the pilot, which was called The New House. However, this one is the 14th in the production, and ratings were seriously dipping, and basically some big cheese at the studio decided they were going to rebrand it, give it a new name, slightly new titles. They were going to drop the whole presentation by, I think it was Bruce Cabot, I think was the presenter. Sorry, Sebastian Cabot was the presenter. That was dropped, and it just went straight into the story. Yeah, I mean, it has a feel of, early 70s horror TV. It looks a little like Night Gallery. That's the kind of feel we're talking about. But it turns out, basically, it introduces us to an unhappy marriage. There's a lady played by Janet Leigh, of the famous Janet Leigh, Marion Crane from Psycho, who looks wonderful in this, it has to be said. This was made in 1973. It aired January the 5th, 1973, I should say. And she's married to a lawyer, but he's also a sort of quite obsessed entomologist who is constantly looking for new species to pin and mount and stuff like that. She doesn't like insects. And it starts with a really weird thing. She's lying in bed and suddenly you kind of see in a mid-range a spider crawling on the surface, which could be the top of the bed or it could be a table. We really don't know, and it's never made clear. She sees it and she screams. So basically, it's her husband's spider. He likes these spiders, but she doesn't. She doesn't like any kind of insects. But she kind of gets on quite well with her husband's partner, who's played by Rory Calhoun. Rory Calhoun was a kind of one of these beefcake kind of actors from the 50s and made a career in TV later on in the 70s as he got older in things like Starsky and Hutch and stuff like that. And it's probably famous for any genre fans for being the guy who's the proprietor in the slasher comedy called Motel Hell. It was also in a very genre movie called Hell Comes to Frogtown. Anyway, they kind of get along quite well, and she thinks he's very interested in her, but nothing is said, nothing is acted upon. Anyway, she's sick of this marriage, and for some reason she divorces and a thing. I guess it's the early 70s, it was still a bit taboo. But she goes to this a cult shop, and Gypsy kind of knows what she's after without her saying anything, and saying, I have a cure for all your problems. She gives him this little bottle or something, and the intimation is, it's poison for her husband. And she goes ahead, and then he has a so-called heart attack, and at this point, after the funeral, she's kind of starts to sort of talk to him, if you have any feelings for me, come see me. And he comes to her and he's like, I just thought I'd better come talk to you. I haven't got any feelings for you. And she goes, but I thought, it's all that. It's all that. In the meantime, she's kind of having weird dreams and weird things happening with insects. And this culminates, and this is really silly, right? It culminates in like a death's head moth flying around. And it's obviously a dead moth on a string. It's really badly done. They should have done it with shadow and lighting, not just had this thing sort of jittering about in the air, not looking like it was alive at all. And basically she's getting not attacked but scared by this thing, and it's kind of imagine in if for example, if you've seen Trilogy of Terror where Karen Black is terrified by the Zuni warrior doll. Imagine, and that was done really well. Imagine if that was a moth on a string. That's kind of what we're getting here. It's not great. It really isn't. But she calls her husband's partner, and he comes, needing help, and he comes over, hoping it's not some sort of false, alarm. And when he goes in, he can't find her. She's kind of not there. But then suddenly he sees a death head's moth mounted and her face in place of the skull, and the effect is pretty bad. It has to be said. And then then it ends. Yeah. The episode's called Death's Head. There was only 9 produced in all for this run of the Circle of Fear, and if they're all up to this standard, I can see why it kind of died. But it's interesting looking at the cast list on other episodes. For example, we have the likes of Martin Sheen, Kim Darby, Leif Garrett. Wow, that's a blast from the past. John Astin is in it, and we know him from Night Gallery. Tab Hunter, another kind of cheesecake from the 50s and 60s, and David Soul in the very last episode. How about that? But yeah, this is not great. It's on YouTube if you did want to see it, but honestly, it's not a big recommend in any shape or form. I think the pilot was pretty good. I think the series must have deteriorated, the quality must have deteriorated. But having said that, looking at the series, there's some interesting actors. There's Angie Dickinson, a young Jodie Foster, Carolyn Jones, from the Morticia from the Addams Family, and Karen Black. So they got some interesting casting here, but the actual show is not great. Now, I think this was kind of show run by Jimmy Sangster from Hammer, the whole lot, which is kind of interesting, right? But it doesn't quite work. It's a bit cheesy and silly. So Circle of Fear, I really wouldn't bother if I were you. Okay, I'm going to wind up there. Before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to